I woke up on Christmas morning in a cold, sterile hospital bed, the heart monitor beeping louder with each pulse in my chest. 2 days in a coma, and no one had bothered to check on me. Not my son, not my daughter-in-law, nobody. My mind was foggy, but the one thing that cut through it was the anger in my gut. My son, Titus, the same boy I'd given everything to, had stolen from me. And not just any small amount. He'd taken every penny I had saved up over a lifetime. I wasn't a fool. I had watched him struggle for years, always bailing him out his messes, always cleaning up after him. But this was the breaking point. As I lay there, hooked up to machines, I realized the betrayal wasn't just financial, it was personal. And that's when it hit me, I had taught him nothing. He had never learned to stand on his own 2 feet. I was done coddling him. He'll regret this, I thought to myself. He'll regret this more than he'll ever know. He'd gone on vacation to the Bahamas with his wife while I was fighting for my life. They'd left me to die in that bed, and they didn't even have the decency to call. Well, now it was my turn to teach him a lesson he'd never forget. I wasn't going to save him this time. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Titus had no idea what I planned. He thought he could just take what was mine and run off like it was nothing. But now I was awake, and the game was over. I wasn't his backup anymore. This was my moment. I wasn't going to chase him down, begging him to come back, or explain to myself like I had before. No, I was going to do something he'd never expect. Something that would leave him with no way out. And when I was done, he would understand what it really meant to lose everything. But first, I needed to take one last look at that house. The next few days were a blur. I wasn't even fully recovered yet, but the idea of sitting in that hospital bed any longer made my skin crawl. I had to get out, had to start moving, or I'd lose my nerve. So, as soon as they finally discharged me, I grabbed my things and walked out of that hospital like a man on a mission. The house, the one I'd shared with Serafina for 30 years, our house, our memories, our life, was now just a chain around my neck. I could feel it suffocating me. Every inch of that place reminded me of the lies, the weakness, the way I'd allowed Titus to take everything from me. I called up a realtor I knew from back in the day, one of those guys who talks a big game, but I didn't care. I wasn't in the mood for negotiations or warm, fuzzy pleasantries. Just sell it, I told him. I don't care what you get, just get it gone. He didn't ask questions. That was the beauty of it. People like him. They're used to old men who just want to unload their property and disappear. I wasn't in the mood for sentimental conversations, and neither was he. By the end of the day, the house was sold, just like that, and the deal was done. No more big, expensive home to keep me tied to the past. But what would Titus say when he came back? When he and Paloma found everything gone, his things, his cozy little life, all packed up and waiting in a storage unit with a key hidden under the welcome mat. I could almost hear his voice now, that whining, entitled tone. Dad, why didn't you tell me? But I didn't care anymore. He didn't deserve a reason. He didn't deserve an explanation. He thought he could walk all over me, take what was mine without a second thought. Well, now the tables were turned, and it felt damn good to be the one in control for once. As I packed up what little I had left, I found an old picture of Serafina and me sitting by the fire at Christmas. It was from our first year in the house. I held it in my hand for a long moment, letting the warmth of memory hit me, and then I set it down on the counter. No more looking back. No more nostalgia. I moved into a small house in a quiet little town, far from the chaos I'd spent years trapped in. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It felt like freedom. But I wasn't done yet. The lesson I was about to teach Titus wasn't over. He'd come home expecting a warm welcome, but instead, he'd find something far colder. The next few days, I watched as the calls came in, one after another, 54 missed calls. I didn't pick up. I didn't even look at the messages. He could wait. It wasn't until the 3rd day of ignoring his calls that I started to feel the weight of what I'd done. But even then, I didn't budge. The phone buzzed constantly. Titus and Paloma, probably wondering where the hell I had gone. To be honest, I didn't care. Not anymore. It wasn't like I'd never given him a chance. Hell, I'd spent years bailing him out of every damn mess he'd gotten himself into. Money problems, relationship drama, work trouble, you name it. Every time I came through. But the moment I needed him, when I was fighting for my life in that hospital bed, not a single call, not a single visit. It was like I didn't even exist. He didn't give a damn about me. And he didn't care about the things that mattered. He just wanted what he could take and run. And that's when I knew I wasn't just his father. I was his enabler. And I had spent far too many years enabling his selfishness, his laziness. I'd always been there to clean up his messes. But this time, I wasn't cleaning anything up. This time, I was drawing a line in the sand. By the time I got settled into the little house in the next town over, the reality of my decision started to hit me. It wasn't just about selling the house or moving out. It was about changing everything. I had been living in a fog for so long, thinking that as long as I kept giving, kept helping, Titus would finally understand. But he didn't. He never did. The sound of the phone vibrating on the counter was almost deafening. I ignored it again. There was something almost sweet about the silence that followed. I could hear the wind rustling through the trees outside, and it reminded me of the days I spent with Serafina, sitting on the porch, just talking about life. Simple, quiet moments, something I hadn't felt in years. I was putting the past behind me, but Titus, he was still in the past, clinging to that idea of being my little boy, the one who could always count on me. But he wasn't a boy anymore. He was a grown man, and it was time he learned that. The next morning, the phone rang again. It was 10 a.m. I let it go to voicemail. When I checked the message, it was Titus, his voice frantic. "Dad, where the hell are you? We've been calling for days. Why did you sell the house? What's going on? We need to talk. Please pick up the phone." The desperation in his voice was almost enough to make me second-guess myself. Almost. But then I remembered what had got me here. What had got me to this point. His selfishness, his arrogance, and the way he'd left me alone on the edge of death without a second thought. I deleted the message, and I smiled to myself. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The days dragged on, but I found a peace in the silence. The constant buzzing of the phone was like a background noise I was learning to ignore. I spent my time doing small things, setting up the fire, making simple meals, cleaning the new house. It wasn't much, but it was enough. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to fix someone else's mistakes. I wasn't bailing anyone out, but I could feel Titus getting closer. It was only a matter of time before he showed up. He wasn't the type to just let things go. He was too entitled for that. He thought the world owed him something. Hell, he probably thought I'd just pick up the phone and everything would be back to normal. But I wasn't going to make it easy for him. Not anymore. The phone rang again. Another day, another call. This time, I didn't even check the voicemail. I didn't need to hear his voice, pleading for me to come back, for me to fix it. I already knew what he would say. "Dad, you're overreacting. It's just money. We'll work it out. Please, just come home." But the thing was, it wasn't just money. It was trust. It was respect. And he had burned both of those. I wasn't going to let him just walk back into my life like nothing had happened. I wasn't a safety net anymore. I pulled the key out from under the welcome mat. The same key I'd left for him to find. The one to the storage unit where I'd put all their things, his Palomas, everything. The key had been waiting for him, and now I was just waiting for him to take the bait. I could picture in my mind the look on his face when he walked through that door, saw the empty rooms, the cold, silent house. He'd be confused at first, maybe even a little angry, and then he'd find the note that would explain everything. Everything I had been trying to teach him for years. I wasn't just taking his house away. I wasn't even just taking his comfort away. I was taking away his excuses. I was making him face the reality he had been avoiding for far too long. The reality that he wasn't a child anymore. The reality that life wasn't going to hand him anything. He had to work for it. That night, I sat in front of the fire. The crackling was filling the quiet room. The only sound, the only movement, was a flame dancing in the hearth. The next morning, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I didn't look out the window. I didn't need to. I knew exactly who it was. It was time. I took a deep breath, stood up, and walked toward the door. This wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. When I opened that door, I wasn't going to be the father he thought he knew. I wasn't going to be the man who'd let him get away with everything for so long. I was going to be something else. Something he'd never forget. I heard the knock on the door, sharp and insistent, like a hammer pounding against my chest. I knew exactly who it was, even before I stood up from the chair by the fire. Titus. He was here, and he was angry. I could hear it in the way he knocked. It wasn't the hesitant knock of someone unsure of their welcome. It was the sound of a man demanding something he felt entitled to. I took my time getting up. There was no rush. I didn't need to be hasty. I had already made up my mind. When I opened that door, it wasn't going to be with a warm embrace of a father who missed a son. It was going to be the cold, hard stare of a man who had been betrayed and wasn't going to take it anymore. I stood there for a moment, just listening to the wind outside, feeling the weight of the decision settle into my bones. And then, with deliberate slowness, I walked to the door, gripped the handle, and pulled it open. Titus stood there, looking like he always did, slightly disheveled, wearing that damn hoodie, hands shoved into his pockets. But there was something different about him now. His face was tight, his eyes wide with confusion and anger. "Dad," he started, his voice already tense. "Where the hell have you been? We've been calling you, what, 50 times? What's going on with all this? You sold the house, our house, and you didn't even give us a heads up." I didn't say a word. I just let the silence hang in the air between us. I let him stew in his frustration for a moment. Let him realize that I wasn't rushing to fix it all for him. He took a step forward, his tone rising. "Dad, this isn't funny. You need to explain yourself. Why would you do this? Why would you just leave us like that? We need you." I took a deep breath. "No, Titus," I said slowly. "You needed me, and I always came through. But now, I'm done being the one who fixes everything for you." His face twisted in disbelief. "What are you talking about? You can't just leave us high and dry. What do you expect me to do? I didn't ask for any of this." The nerve of him. He never asked for it. He never thought he had to. He thought I'd always be there to pick up the pieces, no matter how many times he messed up. But now, the truth was sinking in. "No, you didn't ask. But you took. And you never once thought about what I needed, did you?" I let that hang in the air for a moment. "You took my money, Titus. You took what I worked my whole life for, and you ran off to the Bahamas while I was in a hospital bed, fighting for my life." He looked like I'd slapped him. For a moment, there was silence, and I saw the wheels turning in his head. But then the anger flared again. "This isn't about the damn money, is it? You're just punishing me. Why didn't you tell me what you were doing? Why didn't you just let me explain?" "I didn't need an explanation," I said, my voice steady but cold. "I needed you to grow up." His eyes widened. But before I could say anything more, I stepped aside and motioned for him to come in. "Come on in, son. There's something I want you to see." He hesitated for a moment, but then pushed past me, walking into the living room. His eyes darted around the empty space, confusion spreading across his face. "Where's everything? Where are my things? My stuff, my clothes, the TV?" His voice was rising now, panicked. I let him panic for a few seconds, watching his eyes scan the empty room, his jaw tightening. He took a few more steps into the house, moving faster now, checking every room, every corner. But everything was gone, packed up, sealed away. And then he saw it. The note. It was sitting on the table, right in the center of the room, waiting for him. He grabbed it and tore it open, his eyes scanning the words quickly. His face went pale as he read. And that's when I saw it. The shock. For the first time, he was truly realizing the gravity of everything. And that was just the beginning. Titus crumpled the note in his fist, his knuckles turning white. His voice cracked with a mix of rage and disbelief. "Dad, what the hell is this supposed to mean? You can't just pack up everything and vanish. You can't just abandon us." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, calm as stone. I'd spent a lifetime putting out fires, both real and metaphorical. But this wasn't mine to fix. I didn't abandon you, Titus. I said, steady and low, I gave you exactly what you've been avoiding your whole life. Responsibility. His face flushed red, veins bulging on his forehead. Paloma stepped inside behind him, her tone sharper, colder. This is cruel, she spat. We come back from vacation, and the house is empty? Our things stuffed in some storage unit? You've lost your mind. I looked at her, then back at Titus. No, I've finally found it. The silence stretched, heavy as chains. Titus's eyes darted around the empty walls, as if the furniture might suddenly materialize if he'd just stare hard enough. You can't do this to me, he muttered. I need that house. I need the security. You need to stop needing me. I cut in, sharper than I intended. My words landed like a slap, and I saw the sting flash across his face. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the wind whistling outside, rattling the bare window panes. Then Titus threw the note onto the floor. You'll regret this, he hissed. His voice wasn't just angry, it was desperate. I bent down, picked up the note, smoothed it out, and tucked it back into my pocket. My hands didn't tremble. My voice didn't waver. No, son, this time it's you who'll regret it. Paloma grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the door, but Titus lingered, glaring at me as though he could burn a hole through my chest. He opened his mouth to speak again, but stopped. His pride was too bruised to find words. They stormed out, the door slamming so hard behind them that the walls seemed to shake. I stood alone in the quiet, the firelight flickering against the bare walls. For the first time in decades, I felt light, free, but I also knew this wasn't the end. No, this was only the beginning of the reckoning. And Titus had no idea just how far I was willing to go. That night, I couldn't sleep. The storm outside rattled the windows, but it wasn't the wind that kept me awake. It was the echo of Titus's words. You'll regret this. They rang in my head like a bell. But instead of fear, I felt something else, clarity. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't chasing after him, trying to smooth things over. I was holding the line. I poured myself a cup of black coffee and sat by the fire, the flames painting shadows across the empty walls. My mind drifted back to Serafina. She'd always warned me. She'd said, Sanford, if you don't stop rescuing him, he'll never learn. One day he'll break you. She was right. And lying in that hospital bed, hooked to machines, nearly broken for good, I finally understood her words. By mid-morning, the call started again. My cell lit up like a slot machine in Vegas. Titus, Paloma, unknown numbers. They weren't giving up. 54 calls in 2 days and counting. I let every one of them go unanswered. Every buzz was like a reminder that they needed me more than I ever needed them. Around noon, I stepped outside, breathing in the crisp winter air. The sky was overcast, heavy with snow. Across the street, my new neighbor waved, a young couple, moving boxes into their starter home. They smiled, full of hope. I raised a hand back, but in my chest there was an ache. Once upon a time, I thought Titus and Paloma would build something like that. A life, a foundation. Instead, they built a tower of sand, waiting for someone else to hold it up. When I returned inside, I noticed something on the floor by the door. A folded note slid under the crack. I picked it up, unfolded it, and stared at the messy scrawl. Dad, this isn't over. You owe us. We'll come back. You'll see. I laughed, a bitter sound echoing through the empty house. Owe them? No. That debt had been paid 1,000 times over. I crumpled the note in my fist, tossed it into the fire, and watched the flames devour it. And in that moment, I knew the real battle hadn't even started yet. The next morning, I drove out to the storage unit. Cold air bit my face as I unlocked the door, the metal groaning like it didn't want to give up its secrets. Inside, stacked in neat rows, were all the boxes of Titus and Paloma's things, clothes, electronics, trinkets, all the comforts they thought they couldn't live without. I'd packed every last bit myself, labeling them like evidence in a case. I stood there for a while, hands in my pockets, just looking at the pile. 30 years of me giving, them taking. And now it was all reduced to boxes in a rented space, locked behind steel. Something about that image, it felt right. It felt poetic. I left the unit, slid the key back under the mat at the old house, and drove away. I wanted Titus to find it, to feel that shock of betrayal, to know that this wasn't just some tantrum on my part. This was calculated. This was final. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again. A video message this time. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Titus's face filled the screen, red, sweaty, eyes burning with fury. You think you're teaching me some kind of lesson? You think you can just strip everything away from me and walk off into the sunset? You're wrong, Dad. You're weak. You've always been weak. And now everyone's going to see it. I replayed that line. Everyone's going to see it again and again. He wasn't just angry. He was planning something public. And I knew Titus well enough to understand. He'd come after my pride, just like I had gone after his comfort. I sat back in my chair, staring into the fire, letting the flames blur in my vision. He thought he could humiliate me? No, he didn't know the man he was dealing with anymore. I leaned forward, whispering to myself, if it's a public stage he wants, I'll give him one he'll never forget. A week later, I found out what Titus meant. My neighbor's kid came by with his phone in hand, wide-eyed. "Mr. Sanford, is this you?" he asked. On the screen was a Facebook post. Titus had gone public. He'd written some long, self-pitying rant about how his cruel father had thrown him and Paloma out with nothing, about how I'd lost my mind after Mom died, about how I was ungrateful after all he'd done for me. And the comments, hundreds of them, were pouring in. People I didn't even know, taking a side, calling me a monster. It stung. I won't lie. Seeing strangers judge me without a shred of truth, it cut deep. But anger has a way of burning through pain. And as I read his lies, line by line, a strange calm settled over me. I knew exactly how to respond. That night, I dug through my desk and pulled out an old photo album. Pictures of Titus as a boy. Pictures of me working double shifts at the firehouse. Pictures of Serafina holding his hand while I sat in the background, exhausted but proud. Proof of every sacrifice. I snapped photos of those pages one by one and posted them, not with rage, not with excuses, but with a single line beneath each. This is what I gave. This is what was taken. By morning, the tide had turned. The same people who called me heartless were now asking hard questions. Why hadn't Titus visited me in the hospital? Why had he drained my savings? The truth had a way of cutting through the noise. And for the first time, Titus was the one on defense. His angry replies only made him look smaller, weaker. Paloma chimed in too, but her sharp words just added fuel to fire. I sat there at my kitchen table, sipping my coffee, reading the thread unfold. My hands didn't shake, my chest didn't ache. I felt steady, grounded, because this was the first of many blows. And Titus, poor, arrogant Titus, had no idea that I had only just begun to dismantle the image he'd built for himself. The world was about to see him for who he really was. The fallout was immediate. By the end of the week, Titus had stopped pretending to be the victim and started lashing out. He stormed into my new town, unannounced, trying to corner me in public. I was walking out of the grocery store with a bag of coffee and bread when he showed up, voice booming across the parking lot. "Here he is," he shouted, pointing at me like I was some kind of criminal. "This is the man who abandoned his family. Ask him what kind of father does that." People turned their heads. Some whispered. Others just stared. It was the spectacle he wanted, my humiliation. But instead of shrinking, I stood tall. I set the grocery bag on the hood of my truck and met his eyes. My voice was steady, louder than his. "Tell them the whole story. Titus. Tell them how you left me in a hospital bed while you sipped cocktails in the Bahamas with my money. Tell them how you drained every dollar I saved." The crowd went quiet. His face drained of color. Paloma tugged at his sleeve, hissing under her breath, but it was too late. The damage was done. People weren't whispering about me anymore. They were staring at him. It was the first public crack in his armor, and I felt it deep in my bones. For years, he'd leaned on me, hidden behind me, convinced no one would ever see the truth. But now, the mask was slipping. He cursed under his breath and stormed off, Paloma chasing after him. I picked up my groceries, climbed into the truck, and drove away. My hands gripped the wheel tighter than usual, adrenaline humming through my veins. I had faced down burning buildings, collapsed roofs, walls aflame. But this battle of pride, of truth, it was fiercer than any fire I'd ever fought. And I wasn't backing down, because I knew the next time he tried to humiliate me, it would be him left standing in the ashes. After that grocery store scene, I thought maybe Titus would back off. But no, he doubled down. A week later, he showed up at the town council meeting. I was there to support a local fire department fundraiser. Nothing more. I shook hands, made small talk, felt like part of community again. Then the doors swung open and in walked Titus, chest puffed out, Paloma right behind him. He waited until I was standing at the podium, giving a short speech about service and sacrifice. That's when he struck. Funny hearing about sacrifice from him. He said loud enough for the whole room to turn. This man left his family with nothing. He abandoned his only son. The room went still. I could see the smirk on his face. He thought he had me cornered, humiliated in front of neighbors who barely knew me. I let the silence sit for a beat. Then I leaned close to the microphone and said, calm and clear, yes, I did sell my home. I did pack up everything and leave. And do you know why? I pulled a folded hospital bracelet from my pocket, the one from Christmas Eve. I held it up, letting the fluorescent lights catch it. Because while I was in a coma, this man, my son, took every penny I had and went on vacation. He left me to die. That's the truth. Gasps rippled through the room. Titus's face flushed deep red. Paloma muttered something under her breath, but the crowd was already buzzing, turning their eyes on him, not me. I stepped down from the podium and walked right past him. He tried to catch my arm, whispering, "You're destroying me." I looked him dead in the eye. "No, son, you're doing that all by yourself." The second public humiliation was complete, and this one cut deeper. Because now it wasn't just strangers online. It was people he had to look in the eye. And I knew he wouldn't forgive me for it, which only meant the next move was going to be even uglier. I thought I'd seen the worst of Titus's temper, but I was wrong. He wasn't just embarrassed now. He was furious. And fury makes a man reckless. It was a Saturday morning when I walked into the diner downtown. Same place I've been going since moving here. Folks knew me by name, poured my coffee without asking. It was the closest thing to belonging I'd felt in years. But that morning, Titus was waiting. He stood up from a corner booth, raising his voice before I'd even made it to the counter. "There he is," he shouted, jabbing a finger at me. "The man who calls himself a hero, but left his family in the gutter." Every head in the diner turned. Forks clinked against plates. He wanted a spectacle, and he got one, but this time I didn't flinch. I walked to his table, calm as a man walking into a burning house, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "You're right, Titus. I did leave you. I left you because a grown man doesn't steal from his father while he's lying in a hospital bed. A grown man doesn't run to the islands with his wife while his old man is fighting for his life." The place went dead silent. The waitress froze mid-pour. I could feel the weight of every set of eyes in the room pressing down on us. Titus opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His face twisted, but the words died on his tongue. I leaned closer, my voice steady, measured. "You wanted everyone to see me fall, but all they're seeing now is who you really are." A few people clapped. Just a few, but enough. Enough to break him. His face went crimson, his fists clenched, but he couldn't fight it. Not here. Not in front of everyone. He stormed out, Paloma trailing behind him, her eyes darting nervously around the room. The door slammed so hard the windows rattled. I sat down at the counter, the waitress pouring my coffee like nothing had happened. But I knew better. This was the third public humiliation. And with each one, the cracks in Titus's pride were spreading wider, deeper. And soon, the whole thing was going to collapse. After the diner incident, Titus went quiet. Too quiet. No more calls. No more shouting matches in public. Just silence. And that silence was heavier than all the noise he'd made before. Because I knew my son. I knew that when he stopped yelling, he started scheming. I spent my evenings by the fire, staring into the flames, wondering what he'd try next. Part of me hoped he'd finally gotten the message. That maybe, just maybe, he'd accept a lesson, swallow his pride, and start over. But deep down, I knew better. Titus had always chosen the hard road, the one paved with ego and denial. One night, close to midnight, I heard tires crunching on the gravel outside. Headlights cut through the window blinds. My stomach tightened. I didn't move. I just sat there, listening as a car door slammed. Then another. Footsteps on the porch. A shadow moved past the window. Then the sound of the doorknob rattling. My heart thumped hard against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I picked up the old baseball bat I kept by the chair, a relic from years past, heavy and scarred. Then a voice. Low. Familiar. Titus. Dad. Open the door. We need to talk. But there was no please in his voice. No apology. Just an edge, a threat hiding under the words. I didn't answer. Instead, I stood in the middle of the room, bat in hand, staring at the door. My breathing slowed. Every instinct from years of running into burning buildings told me to hold the line. After a long pause, he tried again, louder this time. You think you can humiliate me? You think you can destroy my life? You got no idea what's coming. And then silence. Heavy footsteps retreating. The engine starting. Tires spinning on gravel, then fading into the night. I lowered the bat, set it gently back by the chair, and exhaled. Titus wasn't done. He was escalating. And I knew the final confrontation was coming sooner than either of us was ready for. The next morning, I walked outside and found a message spray painted across my fence in thick, angry red letters. Thief. The irony nearly made me laugh. After everything he'd stolen from me, my savings, my trust, my peace of mind, he was calling me the thief. But there was no humor in it. Neighbors slowed their cars to stare. A couple walking their dog crossed the street to avoid me. Titus wanted to isolate me, make me look guilty. I didn't paint it over. Not yet. Instead, I stood there in the cold, coffee steaming in my hand, letting the words sink in, letting it burn into me, not as shame, but as fuel, because I knew something he didn't. Reputations are fragile, but truth is stronger, and I was going to let the truth speak louder than his graffiti ever could. Later that day, the sheriff stopped by. He knew me from my firehouse years. He shook his head at the fence and said, "Looks like your boy's lashing out. Want me to press charges?" I thought about it. God knows I had reason. But I shook my head. "Not yet," I said. "He needs to dig his own grave a little deeper first." That night, I wrote, page after page. I put down every sacrifice, every bailout, every dollar, every sleepless night Serafina, and I had given that boy. My plan wasn't revenge anymore. It was revelation. I was going to shine a light, so bright, there'd be no shadows for him to hide in. When I finished, I sat back, staring at the stack of pages on the table. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I felt steady, prepared. Titus thought he was the one cornering me, pushing me toward collapse. But he was wrong. I was the one drawing him in. And soon, he'd step right into the fire I'd built for him. The town hall was packed that evening. Word spread too fast, too loud for it to be an accident. Titus wanted a crowd, and he'd made sure there was one. He stood at the front of the room, pacing like a preacher about to deliver a sermon. Paloma sat off to the side, arms crossed, eyes darting nervously. As I walked in, the whisper started. Some people avoided my gaze. Others gave me nods of quiet support. Titus's voice boomed across the hall. "There he is, the man who abandoned his own blood. Tell them, Dad. Tell them how you betrayed your family." He expected me to shrink, to falter, to beg. But instead, I walked straight to the podium, the stack of pages I'd written tucked under my arm. I set them down, steady as stone, and looked out at the crowd. For 38 years, I began my voice slow, deliberate. I stood by my son. I worked double shifts, sold my own keepsakes, bled and sweat, so he wouldn't go without. I paid his debts, covered his mistakes, and when life burned him down, I built him back up. But while I lay in a hospital bed last Christmas, half dead, he emptied my savings and flew to the Bahamas. That is the truth. I held up the hospital bracelet, letting it dangle in the harsh fluorescent light. Gasps rippled through the room. Titus's face twisted, red and furious. He lunged forward, grabbing the mic. He's lying. He's just bitter, crazy. He wants to ruin me. But the damage was done. Murmurs swept the room, people whispering, shaking their heads. The tide was turning right in front of him. I leaned in close, so only he could hear. You wanted everyone to see me fall. Instead, they're watching you burn. Titus's hand shook on the mic, his words dissolving into stammers. Paloma covered her face. The crowd watched, silent but judgmental, every eye on him now, not me. And I knew in that moment, the final blow was only one step away. The room was buzzing, voices rising and falling like waves. Titus was cornered, his pride cracking wide open in front of everyone. He slammed the mic down and shouted, "You think you're some kind of hero? You're nothing without me. Nothing." His voice broke on the last word, trembling, desperate. I stepped forward, calm as ever, and pulled something from my coat pocket. It was a small Christmas ornament, hand-painted, chipped at the edges, the one Serafina had hung every year in that old house. I held it up high, the light glinting off its surface. "This belonged to your mother," I said, my voice steady but heavy with memory. She believed in family. She believed in love. And you spat on both. You left me in a hospital bed, and you stole what wasn't yours. That's not family. That's betrayal. The ornament trembled slightly in my hand, but I didn't let it drop. Instead, I placed it gently on the podium. A symbol, clear as day. The crowd was silent, every eye on him. Paloma shifted uncomfortably, whispering, "Titus, stop." But he couldn't. His face twisted with rage, veins standing out on his neck. "He's lying," he screamed, but the words rang hollow, bouncing back at him in the still air. I turned to the crowd. I don't need revenge. I don't need payback. All I wanted was respect. But tonight, you all see him for who he is. And that's more punishment than I could ever deliver. The applause started small, then grew, slow claps building into a wave. Not for me, not for the speech, but for the truth laid bare. Titus stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. Paloma stepped away from him, shaking her head. He looked smaller then, shriveled, exposed, stripped of the image he'd built. I picked up the ornament, held it to my chest for a moment, then slipped it back into my pocket. Final, complete. As I walked out of that hall, the cold night air hit me, crisp and clean. For the first time in years, I felt light, free. Behind me, Titus's voice cracked into silence. And that was it. The reckoning was done. My revenge wasn't fire or fury. It was truth. And truth had left him with nothing. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the right.